Welcome to The Romantic Side of Suspense with Sarah Hamaker. In each episode, she'll talk with your favorite romantic suspense authors. They will take you behind the scenes of the writing process, giving excerpts from their writing, and share stories about their writing life.
Bridge of Gold by Kimberly Woodhouse. Repairs on the Golden Gate Bridge uncover a century-old murder. In 1933, Luke Moreau is thrilled to work as a diver at the construction of San Francisco's new bridge, but his underwater discovery brings threats to the one he loves most. Present-day underwater archaeologist Kayla Richardson is called to a secretive meeting with the mayor. While making repairs to the South Tower, human remains are discovered along with a long-lost ship shrouded in legends of treasure. The head of the bridge restoration, Stephen Michaels, suddenly finds himself entrenched in the mystery with Kayla as they dive, and a friendship develops between them. But as the investigation heats up and the remains are found to be from two different eras, more complications come into play that threaten both their reputations and their lives. Could clues leading to a Gold Rush-era mystery that was first discovered during the building of the bridge ignite an obsession still worth killing for?
Hi, and welcome to this episode of The Romantic Side of Suspense. I'm your host, Sarah Hamaker, and I am so glad you joined me. Tonight, I'm talking with Kimberly Woodhouse. She's a best-selling and award-winning author of more than 25 books who loves the joy of story. So welcome to my show, Kimberly.
Thanks so much.
So, Kimberly, 25 books, that's a lot of books. So you must write a lot. So how do you fit writing into your life? Are you a full-time writer? Do you have another day job and then write at the wee hours in the morning? How do you do it?
I'm actually a full-time writer. I've been full-time, I guess, about 4 or 5 years now, and I absolutely love it. I've had lots of other hats, though, during this time as well. I'm a pastor's wife, and I taught music lessons, piano and voice and guitar and flute for many years as well. But then it just, with so many books to write, and the older I got, I realized that I needed to cut back a little bit because I spend, 40 to 60 hours a week writing and researching and, everything else that we do as authors. So it's a full-time job, but I absolutely love it.
Yeah, that's great. Can I be jealous that you can be a full-time writer? Yeah, I guess I am a full-time writer. I just can't. I'm a freelance writer, so I don't spend all my time writing fiction, much as I'd love to. But that's just where I am right now, and which is fine. Fine. I'm very grateful for paying clients. So that's
what counts.
Yeah, that's what counts, exactly. So when do you ever get stuck when writing, or do you ever feel like you need kind of a pick-me-up or a, kind of any more impetus to write? What do you do in those times? Because, we can't be on fire and the words flowing out of our fingers all the time. Or can we? I don't know. Maybe you are.
It definitely is a discipline to write, and so when I do teach a lot around the country about writing and at conferences and everything, and people ask that question all the time, and I always tell people that writer's block is not an option.
Right.
So it's one of those things where, you have these big dreams of what you'll get to do as the creative process, when you're dreaming of becoming a published author, and you just think all of this wonderful stuff. And I tell people, you're going to have to put that out of your mind right now because it's hard work, and it is a discipline. You have to make yourself sit down and write. You can't just wait for, what people call the muse, to hit and you have something brilliant. You have to sit down and actually, what's that old saying that they used to say, butt in chair, hands on keyboard? Hopefully that's not offensive to anybody.
Yeah.
But it's just so important that you sit down and do it. But for me, the biggest thing is always reading a good fiction book, because as writers, we have to be avid readers as well. But a lot of times as an author, we get so caught up in researching and researching, and we read a lot of nonfiction, and we're reading our words over and over and over again. A lot of times to be inspired, we just need to step back and read a good book.
Yeah, and I love what you said about, writing is hard work. So many times I get the impression people say, well, you write books. Well, that must be, it's not physically hard, although sometimes those chairs can get a little hard. But it is a discipline like anything else, and to get good at it, to be able to write more than a book a decade, you do need to really work at it, and to, I think what separates the wannabe writers from the writers is that, the writers put in the hard work. They keep going, and they keep writing and writing and writing, and
very true. Even when you feel like, you have nothing else to give, or that you don't have any good words left, I tell people you still have to keep writing the story, even if what you write, you think it stinks, or, the phrases aren't good, or the words are sloppy, or just whatever. Still, you have to get the story out, and you can always edit. Later. It's just trying to get things on the page, even if you need to write bullet points for the next scenes or however you want to do it. I also encourage people to write synopses, and I hate writing synopses, but they're so good for us because, there's the big argument in the writer world about being a pantser, writing by the seat of your pants, or a plotter. And the thing is, I tell people a discipline really is writing the synopsis, and a synopsis can save your rear end. It's saved my rear end many times, even though I hate writing them. But it's funny how you can still be a seat-of-the-pants writer because you get to be seat-of-the-pants when you're writing the synopsis. And then it has saved my bacon, I don't know how many times, when I've been on a crazy deadline and have had, to write 5 books in a year or whatever, and, all this craziness. Or say your computer crashes and you lose a good part of the manuscript. It's easy to put something back together if you have a good solid synopsis, and a lot of times it also helps you stay on track and not get off on rabbit trails that your editor then says, oh, take that out. Where were you going? So sometimes that really helps with the whole, getting stuck thing too, because a synopsis, you don't have to follow it. But if you do follow it, even if you get off track, a lot of times a good synopsis can help you go, oh, hey, there was that idea. Let's try that, and it can also spark stuff. But again, I hate writing them. I know very few people who actually like writing them. I would much rather just write the whole book than write a synopsis. But after all the discipline of this over the years, I realize how good they are, even though they're a pain.
Yeah, they are a pain. I don't know anyone who loves the synopsis and or proposal process. It's just like, can I just tell you the story and then you just love it and then I can just write it? Can we just do that? Yeah. Exactly. I get it. I get why. And so, I've been trying to get better at that as well. And I don't like plotting. So I guess I'm more of a pantser, but I have come around to the synopsis. I'm like, okay, you're right, because the synopsis is, it is good. And for those who are readers and wondering, if you've written any paper in school, a synopsis is basically you're telling them what's going to happen in the story.
Right.
That's basically what it is. So, and you have to tell everything that happens. There's no surprises in the synopsis, which I think can be difficult for new writers to realize. No, exactly. I want you. You have to tell me who did it. For us romantic suspense writers, they want to know who the bad guy is. Who's it going to be? Why did they do it? How does it fit together? The surprises are for the back cover copy and the salespeople.
Exactly.
Yeah. Your editor wants to know.
Yeah.
Everything.
They want to buy it. Yeah. They need to know what's going to happen. And so, like at the stage that I'm at, I wouldn't necessarily have to have a long synopsis anymore, for editorial teams, to buy one of my books. But most newbie writers, they really need to know up front, if you want to have a solid proposal, you need to have a good, tight synopsis that boom, 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 tells the story so that the editor gets the gist and knows that you have an idea of where you're going and how to get
right.
there.
Yeah,
and then
they're
going to learn the writing.
Yeah, and it knows that you're going to have a satisfying ending, and that you're, for the romantic suspense part, that the romance is there, the suspense is there, that it's not lopsided, unbalanced, and all those things that can happen when we're writing a story. So now, writing romantic suspense, people often die. I mean, it's just, a fact of our books. This happens to happen that way. So how do you research ways to kill someone for your books? I often joke that nobody should look at my Google account because, I research weird ways for people. Not so much weird, but just, how long could they last in the snow without dying?
So true. So true. Years ago, my husband, it was so funny, my husband's a pastor, and we were at a conference, and I don't remember what the conference was for, but we were supposed to introduce each other or whatever, and, we get up there, and my husband introduces me, and he goes, my wife knows how to kill people. And everybody's like in shock, like, okay. But I do a lot. I have a whole lot of research books because I love books. I also do a lot online, but I like to talk to people in person. So I have some sources, one of which is a Navy SEAL and knows way too many ways. People. And I shouldn't laugh about that. I mean, it's real life, but it's taught me some great things about that. So asking questions. So when I tell people I know how to kill someone with a newspaper, people are like, huh, what? But that's a fun one. And then one of my best stories is one day I was reading, Writer's Digest has all these books for writers, and I don't even know if they still publish it, but it was called, I think, The Writer's Guide to Deadly Poisons. So the font just says Deadly Poisons, and that's all my husband could see. Is he came in the door and he walked through and he sees this spine, Deadly Poisons, and he just kept on walking and he goes, should I be worried?
Yeah.
Let's go. You don't need to be worried. Maybe you should be worried. No, I'm not going to tell you. But, there's a lot of different ways to do that. For the longest time, I was hesitant to look up anything online for the very reason you said before. It's like, oh, gosh, what if somebody ever looks at my history? They're going to, the FBI is going to come track me down.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fun ways you can actually research it by talking to people. Like I have a new series coming out from Bethany House that is in the Grand Canyon. It's historical suspense. And so when I was in the Grand Canyon, I talked to the rangers, and this is like 12 years ago. I was talking to them about, so how could someone die?
Yeah.
Here, what would be something you see? And so they had all these crazy stories, and then come to find out there's actually a book written, and one of the rangers sent me to it, and it's called Death in the Grand Canyon, and it's all true stories of how people have died in the Grand Canyon. So it's always good to talk to people. I mean, I was taking golf lessons. I play golf with my husband, and this was years ago, and I asked my golf pro, like, so how could someone die on the golf course? And I think that guy is still scared of me to this day.
Yes. Well, it's always good, I think, as women to keep the men in our life a little bit off balance with stuff like this, right? They don't want to let them get too complacent and get on our bad side because we know things. And we love our husbands, we love our families. Yes, we're not going to be putting into practice any of the things that we know. I mean, frankly, I would be a horrible murderer anyway, because I would just be so scared that somebody would find out, and I could just be a basket case before I did anything. So I couldn't be calm, cool, and collected. I'm just like, no, that's not. It's not going to happen. So we are actually out of time. I was going to ask you more questions, Kimberly, but we have to say goodbye now. So Thank you for being on my show.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
So you've been listening to The Romantic Side of Suspense. I'm your host, Sarah Hamaker, and I've been talking with Kimberly Woodhouse, the best-selling author of more than 25 books, who loves the joy of a story. And stay tuned to hear an excerpt from one of her latest books, Bridge of Gold.
Now an excerpt from Bridge of Gold by Kimberly Woodhouse. Luke, March 1st, 1933. The dive suit was bulky and heavy, but as they placed the large, round metal helmet over his head and began to latch him in, Luke was thankful for the protection. The sea was turbulent. Currents from the Pacific pushed into the strait, while the San Francisco Bay, with all its freshwater streams and rivers dumping into it, pushed back in a violent tug-of-war. 4 times a day they had a scant 20-minute window to dive when the tides were just right. The only way the Golden Gate Bridge would get built was if they were able to build the South Tower, but that meant they had a lot of underwater construction to do. Stewart tapped Luke's helmet, and Luke gave him a thumbs-up signal. The hose that provided his air from the surface clicked into place. It was almost time for him to go. He stepped up onto the metal plate on the large steel swing that would lower him into the water. Thoughts of Margot swirled in his mind. She'd said yes. The weight of the past few years and all its dark and depressing circumstances were washed away with the simple thought of her. How blessed he was to have her love and devotion. He couldn't help but grin wide inside his dive suit. No matter what happened, he would always have Margot. Another tap to his helmet drew his attention upward. The look on Stewart's face made Luke chuckle. Since he'd told the other guys this morning about his proposal, he'd been teased incessantly about wiping the smile off his face. But he'd better focus now. The job demanded every bit of his attention. After days of this work, he'd gotten used to the rhythm, but not to how difficult it was to see underwater. Gratefulness for his sight flooded through him. Visual cues and reminders were a part of every aspect of life. The strong current constantly swirled dark silt. Even with the lights on their suits, the murky water made him feel like he was blind most of the time. A couple of the men had not been able to handle the conditions and asked to work elsewhere. But Luke was determined to do his best. Whether he could see or not, the job needed to be done. A bell dinged. Time to go under. As he was lowered into the water, he focused on what he needed to accomplish in the next 20 minutes. Several other divers were going down to the 100-plus foot depth so they could make the most of their tiny window. The charges were going to be set over the next several weeks to finish clearing the area they needed for the base of the South Tower. Everything had to be in place for it to work. But the water was different today, pushing and pulling him on the heavy metal swing. As he gripped the large chain through his gloves as tight as he could, he closed his eyes and focused on his breathing until he felt the swing touch the seafloor. Working so close to the cliff underwater where the depth of the strait plummeted was a very real danger every diver was aware of. Not being able to see made the fear of going over the edge even more intense. Falling off the edge would bring disaster and death. The weight of their suits would take them to a depth no man could survive. But Luke clamped his jaw, took a deep breath, and went to work. He fought with every muscle in his body against the water's surge to keep in the correct place. Every once in a while, the current cleared the water a bit, and he could see farther than just a foot or so in front of his face. But it didn't last long. He'd learned to be alert and ready when it happened so he could gauge his surroundings. Their lights couldn't cut much in the dark at this depth. He set another charge and fought against the strength of the water. At this rate, it would take them a long time, probably longer than the scheduled timeline, to get the seafloor cleared enough to build the tower walls. Once the walls were above the surface, they could drain all the water out and build the rest of the massive, towering structure. The engineering was brilliant, but the hazards of nature were fierce. The designers knew some about the conditions and had planned accordingly, but it hadn't been until the workers began the project that they discovered what a challenge the construction would be. The North Tower was well underway, while the South Tower would take many more months to complete. Out of nowhere, he felt like he was being pushed, as if the water had turned into a giant arm and was shoving him against the push of another giant arm. He felt the pull on his air hose as the water moved him farther from where he started. The water swirled and was too dark for him to be able to see anything. How far would it take him? In that next instant, his feet gained the bottom, but then slid. He was going over the edge. Grabbing at anything with his hands, he was slammed against something hard. He held on to the underwater cliff for dear life. He braced himself with his feet and arms, hoping that when the force of this current shifted, he would be able to push off and have enough momentum to swim up and over the edge back to safer footing. Then he'd have to make it back to where he'd been working and find the lift swing. In that moment, the water cleared and his light glimmered off something in the wall before him. No, it couldn't be. His heart was racing from his precarious position. He must be seeing things. He blinked to clear his eyes, breathed deep several times to calm himself, waited for the water to clear again. There it was. Gold. No matter how many times he blinked, his light glimmered on the object. Using his bulky, glove-covered hand, he clawed at the piece until it came free. He gripped it tight. A bit smaller than a golf ball, but this was no tiny nugget. Where had it come from? Could there be more? What was down here that would have gold? Treasure hunters had scoured the waters for decades with very little to show for it. Surely there wasn't anything left. It must be something else. Just a rock. Or something man-made. But what had made it shine in the light? And where had it come from? The surge of water from behind him decreased, and before he knew it, the flow shifted and he was being shoved in the other direction and up. For a split second, the water was clear, and his light made the picture in front of him distinct. The outline of a ship. He blinked. It was gone. The water was once again too dark and cloudy to see through. Working with the current, he kicked his legs and swam as hard as he could, trying to get up over the ledge. A tug on the hose aimed him back in the right direction. His time was up. He had to make it back to the swing so they could lift him back to the surface. The ride up was slow, so the divers would be able to handle the adjustment in pressure as they rose from the depths and not develop bubbles of air in their brains, the fear of every diver. Making his way back to the swing, his thoughts went back to the cliff and the ship. Maybe he'd dreamed it. His brain could have made up the silhouette he'd seen. Hadn't the doctor warned them of such things happening while diving? As he crept toward the surface, he closed his eyes for a few seconds and took long, deep breaths. Then he opened his eyes, brought his hand close to the window in his helmet, and looked at what he'd carved out of the wall. His heart beat faster in his chest. This could change everything for him. Gold. He'd found gold.
Thanks for listening to The Romantic Side of Suspense with Sarah Hamaker. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review. You can sign up to receive notifications of upcoming podcasts and listen to previous editions at sarahhamakerfiction.com.